English language, there's some weird things going on over here, okay? And I'm not talking just like grammar and commas and stuff. I'm like, there's just like some words that we use for different things that it's like, it just doesn't really make sense. It just got me thinking about different slang that I'm like, if you grew up outside of our culture, you would have no idea what this means. It's like, bro, those shoes are fire. Like if I'm a like ESL student, like English second language, I'm like, bro, do I need to grab water for those? Like, do I need a fire extinguisher? Like, are they actually on fire? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of weird if you don't grow up in the culture. Drip is another one. It's like, hey, dude, you got drip on you. It's like, did I spill something? Did I, like, it's just kind of a confusing word. NPC, ladies, specifically, you guys know what this means? Are there any girls that, yes, okay, you do? What does it mean? Say it. Yeah, non-playable character, just someone's acting robotic, you know what I'm saying? That's one that's like a little more recent, a little more relevant, different things. This one just made me feel old. Riz? I'm like, this is the first time that I think after I graduated college that I was like, wow, it happened. Like, I literally have no idea what they're talking about. Like, literally. I'm standing in a fraternity pool room the other day. He's like, this dude's talking about Riz, and I was like, what? Like, different things. It's from charisma, okay? When you turn on your charisma, I think. I don't know, honestly. It's a weird one. Honestly, to me, it's just a little sus in general. But which is another one that doesn't really make sense. It's like not actually a word, but it's sus. And honestly, it's mid in general. Which mid isn't actually bad. Like if it's average, mid, I don't know. I still don't know what it means. I don't know how to use it. Anyways, hey, we're not talking about just slang and communicating different things. We're going to be talking about communicating your faith. Communicating your faith is like one of the first steps that you can take when leaving a legacy. And it's honestly like the best first step. The whole idea of leaving a legacy is living for something that outlasts you, that matters beyond even your life. When you think about different things that you can give your life to, everyone's trying to leave a legacy in some way. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about how you guys actually can leave a legacy by sharing and communicating your faith. Just for context, when we're talking about communicating your faith, we're going to be using this definition. So there's a handout on your chair, and there's a box that you can write this definition in if you're taking notes or anything. But when I'm talking about communicating your faith, what I mean by that is passing on the message of the gospel to others. And the gospel is just the story of, it's what this past weekend was all about, Easter weekend. It's a story about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and how through him we can actually have a restored relationship with God and experience a right relationship with him. Communicating your faith is just helping others understand their opportunity to respond to God through faith in Jesus Christ. And others up there would really be anyone. So you can think about your friends, classmates, roommates, coworkers, family members, high school friends. It can really be anyone. You can start communicating your faith to anyone. And this is just something that's true for all believers. Jesus, at the very start of him starting to invest in people during his time on earth, he just said that this was going to be true for people that followed him. He describes his people like this in Matthew 5:14. He says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." And you can write this down. I don't have it up here, but John 8:12, Jesus actually calls himself the light of the world. And then here in Matthew 5:14, he says, hey, actually, you who follow me, you guys are going to be the light of the world. And you guys are going to be the ones that carry on the message of the gospel and pass that on to other people. So for the rest of our time, I'm just going to talk about, hey, how can we actually communicate our faith? Because everyone in here can, and I'm going to talk about how you can. So if you've been communicating your faith for a while, maybe it's been a few years for you, and you've been doing this and you have some experience under your belt, like, look at these fundamentals, these ABCs of sharing your faith, and really evaluate, hey, like, am I living these out? Like, can I live these out even in a greater way? Because I really do think it'll increase your influence in communicating your faith. And if you're new to this whole idea of communicating your faith, maybe you don't even have a faith, well, I'm excited to introduce to you these fundamentals, these ABCs, if you will. So the first one is audibly. So you can communicate your faith by doing it audibly. And what I mean by audibly is, talking about it out loud. Like using words is what audible means. It's funny because the language in the Bible surrounding this idea of communicating your faith and the message of the gospel to others, it's all about words and like literal audible sound. Mark 1, when Jesus first begins his ministry, the way he begins it is by saying, "The time has come, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, repent and believe in the gospel." He uses words. It's an audible phrase that he says. In Acts 4:19, there's some people that are communicating their faith to another group of people. And Peter and John are the guys doing it. They say, "Hey, we cannot help but speak." Audibly speak of what we've seen and heard. First Thess uses the words and talks about how the Thessalonians, the word of the Lord sounded forth from them. It's that idea of audible noise. And then Colossians, 2 Timothy, similar words. Romans 10 even uses this word that describes someone who communicates their faith as a herald of the gospel. By show of hands, anybody know what a herald is? I think like medieval times, different things. Okay, maybe more hands will go up for this one. Anybody seen Shrek 2? Oh, yeah, okay, most of the room. Well, there's a herald in that movie, okay? This is the herald, right? He comes, there's like a big announcement, trumpets, blasts, and then what's the herald's job? He just reads off the message of the king. He is the messenger, the liaison, the ambassador of the king. And what's his job? To communicate audibly the message of this higher authority. And that's the type of, probably not the image, but that's the type of language that the Bible uses when it's talking about sharing and communicating your faith. Because the reality is actions just aren't enough when it comes to communicating your faith to someone. Which just kind of makes sense, right? Like if we're communicating different information to different people, like sometimes, like, yeah, body language can help and like add to different things, but if you're not using words, it's actually really hard. Okay, I'm gonna show you a clip of a video, and this guy's trying to order coffee without using words. So I've never seen the movie, but the clip does a pretty good job of explaining it.
Good morning, sir. What can I get started for you today? What size? All right. 3 instant lattes. Would you care for a pastry? Nope. Mocha. 3 mocha lattes. Double chocolate chip muffin. Yum. You want 3 Paul McCartney CDs. Awesome. I love the Beatles. They are my life. Something. Assassination. Abraham Lincoln. Me. Gun. Shoot. 3 shots. I know, I'm a little slow today. All right. So, 3 lattes, 3 mochas, double chocolate chip muffin, and 3 shots. No assassinations. Oh, and 3 Paul McCartney CDs. That's gonna be 6812. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, the point is, it's like kind of a funny clip, but it's like the point is it's really hard to communicate a complex message without using words, right? And when you think about communicating this idea that, hey, there's actually a God out there that created everyone, that loves you, that he's not actually far from each one of us, but that anyone can respond to a relationship with him by placing their trust in Jesus, body language probably isn't going to do it. You know what I mean? That's kind of a complex message. It makes sense why the Bible would say that we need to audibly use words. So these are a few different ways that you can audibly use words to communicate your faith. Spiritual conversations are a great way to spark up conversations with people, asking people about their spiritual background. Like, hey, do you have a relationship with God? If you don't, okay, tell me what that's like. What's faith like for you? Another thing you can do is share your testimony. Testimony is just your own personal story of how you came to faith and different things. You can share that with other people. You can read the Bible, different passages of the Bible with people. John 10 is something I love to read with people when I'm trying to help them learn about Jesus. It talks about how Jesus is a good shepherd, that he actually lays down his life for his sheep, that there's one flock that Jesus has, and that the only way to get into that flock is by the door, which is him. And it helps people understand the message of the gospel so that you can pass that on to different people. So those are all ways you can audibly share your faith. That's the first way that you want to share your faith, is you want to do it in a way that's audible. The B of communicating your faith would be doing it boldly. Boldly communicating your faith. And what I mean by that is just doing it with confidence. There's a lot of examples in the Bible of people communicating their faith boldly and with confidence. Acts 4, we referenced these guys a little bit earlier, but Peter and John, they're communicating their faith, and this was what is written about them. Now, when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, they perceived that they were uneducated common men, and they were astonished. And they recognized that they had been with Jesus. That's part of what made these guys so good at communicating their faith, is just they had the boldness to do so. 1 Thess 2 is another passage of scripture that talks about how Paul communicated his faith to the Thessalonians, the people that lived in this city called Thessalonica is the name of the city. But it says this, Paul's writing to this group of people. He says, "For you yourselves know that our coming to you was not in vain. But though they had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of much conflict." And the next couple of verses start to explain why he did that, not from error and impurity or any attempt to deceive, but from a good heart of that. But you think about that, and why were these guys so bold to do that? Like, this verse talks about how at a previous city, Paul had shared and communicated his faith and experienced a little bit of conflict with that, but then right after that goes to another city and declares with all boldness different things. And I think there's like two little subpoints on your handout, but there's two reasons why I think we can boldly communicate our faith. The first one is, well, let me give you an example. If something is true enough, and if something is impactful enough, it causes someone to share something boldly, okay? So here's an example. Anybody have any classes in Hale Library at all? No one? I have one friend. His class is in Hale Library. I ran into him. No one has classes in Hale. Okay, let's just say you're studying in Hale. People do that, right? Okay, say you're studying in Hale, and you're sitting in one of those reserved study rooms, right? You have all your notes up on the whiteboard, right? People use those. I've seen it. I don't really study anymore. But you're in there, and someone barges into your study room, right? They have the audacity, okay, the boldness to step into your study room, and they just start like saying and communicating something to you. But here's what they're communicating. They're like, hey, it happened in 2016, it's back. This building's on fire, okay? Like, Hale's about to burn down. In order to save your life, you need to get out of this building. And then he runs off and starts telling other people. That makes sense, right? Like, what would happen if Hale Library is actually on fire? Like, you would leave, okay? And you would go. But then go back to the guy in the room. What would make him, like, go up to someone he doesn't know, like, spark up a conversation with them and communicate something to them? Well, it's because of the truth and the impact of his message, right? If it's actually true that Hale Library is burning down, then that's worth being bold for, right? And if it can actually impact that person by saving them from being in a burning building, then that leads to boldness. Because, and you can write this down, when we can have confidence in the message's truth and impact. Because when a message is true and when a message is impactful enough, it's worthy of being bold to communicate it. And for those of us following Jesus, we have a similar opportunity. Like, we're not saving people from a burning building, but we do have a truth, and it does impact people. The truth is in John 3:18. It says, whoever believes in Jesus is not condemned. They don't have to suffer condemnation. But whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And there's a weighty truth in that. The truth is that people whoever does not believe is condemned already. They actually have a judgment waiting for them. But part of that truth has a pretty significant impact on people if we choose to be bold and communicate it. And the impact is in Romans 10:13. It says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. I mean, that impacts everyone. And And that's a great thing, that people can escape this condemnation through the impact of this message. Well, what that should lead to is us being really bold with that message. We want to be boldly communicating it. We have a message that's true and impactful. And even going back to like the burning building analogy for a little bit, that's like one of the most loving things that you can do for someone, right? If someone was in a building and it was about to collapse, or it was like in jeopardy because of fire, rightfully so, like we celebrate people that go in after their lives to save them, right? Like firefighters, they have to overcome the fear of like, I don't know if these stairs are about to give out because of the building's integrity being on fire and different things like that. Well, it's a really loving thing for that firefighter to go in and rescue someone, right? And they have to have a level of boldness with it. Well, we're not rescuing people from burning buildings necessarily, right? But we do have a message that's true and it's impactful, and it's worth us being bold to cross the lines, to love people, to give them an opportunity to hear about the good news that is Jesus Christ. So I just encourage, like, because of the message's truth and the message's impact, I would just say, hey, send it. Like, if you're thinking about different friends you have, if you live with people and they don't know about your faith just yet, if you have friends from high school, if you have friends that you live with in class, coworkers, different types of people, even if they don't seem like they would be, you don't read them as like being responsive to it, I would say you won't know unless you boldly try. Like, I feel like I've like tried to get in other people's shoes and be like, oh, I don't know if they would respond to like me like bringing up my faith, and then I ask them and they're like, bro, let me tell you my life story. I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. But it's because it takes a little bit of boldness to cross that barrier. So first one is audibly, B is just doing it boldly, and then C is just consistently. You can consistently share your faith. And we kind of need consistency in two different areas. The first area would just be consistency between your life and the message that you're actually trying to communicate. And Peter's actually writing to a group of people that are just starting to walk with God and that had just recently placed their trust in Jesus, that were trying to live out their faith. And he gives them an encouragement in 1 Peter 2:12. He says, hey, they were living among this group of people called the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are people that didn't have a faith, that weren't following Christ. But Peter writes this to them. He says, hey, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. And what the encouragement there is that they should be living out their faith so that they can actually see people's good deeds, and it'll actually add credibility to their message. Because here's a disclaimer with that. It's like, Peter's not saying, hey, you should just live out your faith perfectly before you ever talk to anybody about it. I mean, if we all waited till we were absolutely perfect to ever bring up faith to anyone, we would never bring up faith to anyone, because no one's perfect. Like, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. That's why Jesus had to come and die. Jesus was the only one. But Peter is highlighting a principle here. He's saying, hey, the credibility of the messenger depends on how well they live out that message. Here's what I mean. You can think about it. Everybody know who David Beckham is? Yeah, great guy, great hair, okay? And not only do I think he has great hair, but Brow Cream, back early in his career, thought that he had good hair. I've never heard of this brand in my life. Anyways, they signed a deal with David Beckham, right? They're like, hey, he's on the rise, he's a phenomenal soccer player. We're going to give him this deal with this hair gel. Well, he signed like this 4-year deal, and then 2 years into the deal, Brow Cream's sales dropped 25%. And they were having a hard time explaining it. They were like, wait, why did this happen? And they think it's because David Beckham's like credibility of like sponsoring or like endorsing the cream took a hit. Anyone want to know why? Because he shaved his head. 2 years into the deal, there was nothing in the contract about him keeping a certain length of hair or anything like that. He shaves his head, and literally their sales plummet 25%. Why? Well, if he's not using it and living it out, it means a little bit less if he's trying to endorse this product, right? The credibility of the message kind of depends on if the messenger is living this out. or not. And this is an even more fun example in my mind. 2013, BlackBerry's trying to take it to the next level, okay? There's a lot of celebrity endorsements going around. I mean, Alicia Keys, this girl's on fire, right? And that was good, okay? That was you laugh. No, Alicia Keys, they don't just say, hey, we want you to do an ad. They don't say, hey, we just want you to do a commercial. They're like, yo, we're gonna make you the creative director of BlackBerry, okay? She becomes the creative director, whatever that means, and for the company. And what she does is she loses the job pretty quickly. And it's kind of because of this tweet. She says, started from the bottom, now we're here. And it's not because she doesn't have an apostrophe in the word weird, okay? But anyone want to know why she lost credibility with BlackBerry? Twitter via iPhone. That's tough. That's tough if you're the creative director for BlackBerry. She loses the job because why? Well, the credibility of the message kind of depends on if the messenger is living that out or not. And in the same way, that principle kind of applies when we're talking about communicating our faith. It really hurts our message if we're not living out our faith. So we want to have a consistent life. We want to have consistency between our life and the message that we're talking about. So I was just thinking of different things that we want to do and pursue in order to communicate our faith effectively. One is just being obedient to Christ, like really trying to flee sin instead of indulging in it. Different things like reading His Word to follow Him better, praying consistently, plugging in with others that can push you in your relationship with God. I was also thinking about just how you treat and interact with other people, being patient with people, not gossiping about other people, actually letting the words that come out of your mouth like bring life to people versus tearing them down. Different things like that. All those are ways that we can actually build credibility for us communicating our faith. We want to have consistency between our life and our message. Not only do we want consistency between those two, but the last area that we want consistency in, and this kind of wraps up the fundamentals of communicating your faith, would be consistency in actually communicating your faith. And what I mean by that is sharing your faith as a lifestyle, as a regular thing, as something that just routinely happens, versus it just being like an occasional happening, or just a one-time thing, or just popping in and out of people's lives to communicate, making it something that's just really obvious from your life. I love Romans 1:16 because Paul, it was just obvious in his life. He writes like, hey, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. For it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. And what Paul's saying is, hey, it's just obvious. Like, if you interact with me, you're probably going to interact with the gospel. And I love the imagery that Jesus uses because Jesus had that in mind when he was talking about us being his witnesses and us communicating our faith to other people. In Matthew 5:14, I've just been thinking about this verse a lot all year. Really, it's at the top of your handout. I mentioned it before. But Jesus even describes his people as a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. Like a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Manhattan's not really on a hill. It's like, honestly, I feel like I come over a hill to get down into Manhattan. But in India, there's a city that's set on a hill. It's called Shimla, India. And I'm like, it's honestly like, kind of like, magnificent to look at, low-key. Like, I'm like, it just looks like a really impressive city. But I'm like, if you're approaching this thing, this is a really hard thing to hide. Like, it's just really obvious that this city is here. So it makes me wonder, I'm like, well, what was Jesus getting at when he said, you are the light of the world, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden? I think he's getting at, hey, it should be obvious. Like, our faith should be obvious to other people. It should just be one of the first things that comes up when someone interacts with me. It's an obvious thing about my life. I think about my life now, I'm like, this is just one of the first conversations that I have with people. It's like, hey, yeah, like, I have a faith, and it just starts getting communicated before I can even help it. And it makes sense because my relationship with Jesus is the most important relationship in my life. And if you have one, it is the most important relationship in your life. It would be kind of weird if that was hidden from other people. Like, if you've had more than 2 conversations with me in the past, like, month and a half, you probably know I'm getting married in like 26 days. And I'm like lit about it, okay? Like I just talk about it all the time. Like I'm in the gym. People are like, what's up, man? I'm like, I'm getting married. How are you doing? You know, like I'm just excited about it. And why? Well, it's because Haley, my fiance, she's just an increasing and growing in importance of a relationship in my life. She's about to become like the second most important relationship in my life besides Jesus. It would be kind of weird if I didn't communicate about her. It would be weird if I didn't talk about her, if I didn't bring her up audibly and boldly and consistently. You know what I mean? Because if you have an important relationship, it's natural that it would come up. And there's a parallel there for us in our relationship with God. If I have a relationship with God, well, it'd be kind of weird if people didn't know that side of me, if I didn't bring that up to other people. It's one of the most natural things. So those are the ways that we can and have the ability to communicate our faith. We can do it audibly, we can do it boldly, we can do it consistently, and it really will help us even help others understand what it means to have a relationship with God. One of the things we like to do is actually hear from someone who actually lives these out, who's in your shoes, who's a student with you guys. And I got a buddy, Caleb, and we're not going to hold it against him, but he spells his name wrong. With a K. No hard feelings. But Caleb's actually going to come up here, and he's going to share a little bit about what it looks like for him to even communicate his faith. So
Hi, so as Caleb mentioned, my name is Caleb White, and for you guys that don't know me, there's probably a good reason for that. I actually don't go to K-State. I actually go to Washburn, and I play football there. We are the Ichabods. And if you guys are wondering what an Ichabod is, it's this thing right here, and it's actually a dude named Ichabod. So Ichabod, Washburn Ichabods. So tonight I want to share with you what that's looked like for me with communicating my faith, as Caleb brilliantly laid out. And I came to Christ about 2 years ago, and really ever since that day, in the summer of 2021, God's really grown my heart for Him, but also other people, and making a difference and living for His purposes. So I remember 3 years ago, there's this little hole-in-the-wall burger joint in Topeka, Kansas called Cook's American Grill, and I was sitting at a booth with a guy named Jordan and a guy named Jacob. And I remember Jordan, at some point throughout that meal, he just took out a napkin. Just a random napkin and started writing out this verse called Romans 6:23, and it really laid out my position before God and what the truth of the gospel was. And I remember about 6 months after that, I actually came to Christ and gave my life to Him. And really since then, God's just opened my heart and my eyes to what His truth is. And I think about a year and a half after that, so this last fall, I was sitting in Fuzzy's taco shop with that same Jacob. And we were just kind of catching up, seeing how the summer was and how our lives have been. It'd been a while since we caught up and talked, but throughout that conversation, I got to share the gospel with him and really just get an understanding of, man, where are you at? How are things going? And how can I continue to help you? And I learned through that conversation and having the opportunity to share the gospel with him that he had come to Christ within the last couple weeks. And God just really used that conversation to grow my heart for him, but also for Jacob, and just how much God has grown Jacob's heart for not only him, but also others. So getting to have the gospel share with me, being able to share with others has been a blessing, but also getting to witness two guys have a conversation while I was hanging out with them. So I was hanging out with Sonic. This was February of this year, and a guy named Trey and a guy named Juju. And I was kicking it at Sonic in Topeka, Kansas, and throughout that conversation, Trey got to share the gospel with Juju. And Trey came to Christ a month earlier, and I continued to grow in reading God's word and understanding what God's will was for his life. And he can continue to just be obedient to him. And in that, Trey shared the gospel with Juju. I think it's been so cool to experience not only God's word impact in my life, but being able to impact others through having a relationship with Christ, but also being able to see other guys do that same thing. And I think a couple verses that come to mind for me are Isaiah 55, verses 10 and 11, which says, that God's will be successful in the thing for which he sent it. And in John 5, it really shows that God's word bears witness about Jesus. And I think it's just so cool to know that there's a God who loves each and every one of us, and that he has a will for us to know him, become more like him, and also reflect him and make him known to other people. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity. I really hope you guys we'll dig into this talk and have some conversations afterwards. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the example of living it out. And actually, that's what we're going to do right now is just take some time to actually discuss what we're talking about. It's it's a really cool privilege that God gives us to even get involved in communicating our faith. It's a privilege that He would even use us to do that. So that's what we want. That's our hope for all you, is that you would even get involved with that and really get involved with living and leaving a legacy that's going to outlast by doing that. So go ahead and discuss these with the people around you. It just has questions dealing with, hey, how can you audibly take a step, boldly take a step, and even consistently take a step in communicating your faith?